so we can get started on this big chapter. Good to see you. Hey, there's Todd and B. Disney, Hannah, Amanda. Good to see you guys.
Hey, Dad.
What? I know. I'll do it later. I'm doing Bible study right now. No. I'm doing Bible study right now. We'll talk about it later. I told you already.
I always get into always say black and always scares me.
She's so cute. Hannah had her birthday yesterday, so she just turned 4. It was great. Hey, positive blessings, Marie, I mean. Everybody's got a little bit of a cough, so it's something we're dealing with, but so you'll have to forgive my voice. It's a little off. It's mostly gone, though. Give people a couple seconds to join up. We're going to be doing Luke chapter 21. That's the big quote-unquote end times passage. It should be, we'll probably be here at least 2 weeks, probably more, depending on how many questions we get. I'll give an intro here in just a little bit. That's where are we at? How many people we got? 32. We've been missing a couple of Bible studies. Did we not have it last week? Something happened. Couldn't make it work out. Oh, it was shopping night, I think. Whew. We just finished our game night, which was, we did our Last Lands Tuesday, which is a video game night, is the last Tuesday of the month for family game night, and we didn't do it last Tuesday because, again, was shopping, so I did it tonight. That's one of the kids' favorite game nights is video game night. We'll be playing mini golf. Hey, good to see you, Todd. Glad you can make it. Should be an exciting chapter. So, I was debating whether or not we should go through the audio of the entire Luke 21 and then go back, or are we going to spoil too much? I guess it's not terribly long. Maybe that'll be best. I'll give a little intro here. Hey there, Chris. Glad you can make it. How much time? Yeah, we're 3 minutes in. I want to go ahead and get started. First time watching a Bible study. Oh man, you're in for a treat. Well, I don't know if a treat. You're going to think I'm a crazy man. We're doing Luke 21 tonight, which is the big end times chapter. So I already gave much more detail on my thoughts on this, and I think what the Bible shows on this in my Matthew 24 video. You can go back and watch that if you'd like, or if you look in the description of this video right underneath, if you look at the description about the Bible study, it'll say talking about the end of the world. Is the end of the world in your future? And you can click on that video there. That's the Matthew 24 video, and it is much more in depth than what this is going to be. I don't have all my notes together. I was going to print all my notes out for different things, but I'll just go off of what the text says in memory, and it won't be near as prepared. And so, if you want to get a much more in-depth, thorough thing, if you're watching this on the replay, I'm going to put a link up in the top here for a little card for the End of the World video. Like I said, I spent weeks making that video and putting it all together with all the information. It's really easy to follow. It's a lot of fun. We'll have it here too, and there's some things in Luke 21 that aren't in Matthew 24, and vice versa. But it's basically going to be the same thing. And so I just want you to keep an open mind as we do this. And I want you to be listening and paying attention for cues as to when and these things happen and what is the event surrounding it and who he's talking to. See, there's some serious clues in here. You're going to have to undo. Let's just put it on a shelf for a while, your preconceived ideas about what you think that this is referring to. And let's just read it and do the same thing we've been doing for this whole Bible study. We're going to consider who Jesus is talking to, who's being talked to in the passage, the situation, the audience that are listening to it, who's doing the talking, the time that it's talking, the events that are happening, and we don't necessarily need to read in attack helicopters and killer bees if it doesn't say attack helicopters and killer bees, if you're following me. There's some pretty big clues. In fact, in this particular version, this is called the Olivet Discourse because Jesus gives it on the Mount of Olives. It's echoed in Mark 13, Matthew 24, and Luke 21. And they all talk about the same thing. And so this one here has got some pretty big cues as to what exactly should be expected. And like I said, try to see if you can keep an eye out for some of these indicators while we're going through it. So I think we'll just jump right in, and I want you guys to ask questions. You guys have known that I've kind of told you I have a little different view on the end time stuff, and by me having a different view, I just read what the Bible says, and I believe it. I know everybody claims to do that, but especially when it comes to this passage, they don't like the implications of doing that. I find very few people that are willing to take the Bible at face value on this passage because we're raised with certain things, and I was raised with the standard same stuff. There's going to be a 7-year period of tribulation with Antichrist, 3.5 good years, 3.5 bad years, covenant with the Jews, third rebuilt temple, all this stuff, apocalypse, all these things. And I want you to decide when we go through this, is that what this is saying? Or is it not? What else could it be saying? And so we have to take the Bible as true. We have to believe it, especially when it comes to the words in red, which are Jesus' words. We have to believe that what he said is true. And if it doesn't make sense to us, chances are it's us that are wrong or missing something, and not that Jesus is wrong. And of course, nobody would say Jesus is wrong. But if you come right down to it, people do say Jesus is wrong. In fact, atheists make a lot of hay on this chapter, saying Jesus promised things in his lifetime, in the disciples' lifetime, that didn't happen. And I would argue that they did. So in the same way that they were expecting Jesus to come as a conquering king, to sit on a throne, the real physical throne of David with 6 lions on each side, and destroy the Romans and the Gentiles, the nations, and rule over them in a physical way. That's why they killed Jesus. That's why they crucified him. And I would dare say today people are making the same mistake. They're still expecting that physical throne with Jesus to sit on a physical kingdom and to physically rule the world. And I would argue that that's probably not what the Bible is saying now, just as much as it was true in those days. Alrighty, here we go. Luke 21. I guess we'll go through the whole chapter and we'll go back next week because we're not going to finish this week, but context is important.
Luke 21. As he looked up, Jesus saw the rich putting their gifts into the temple treasury. He also saw a poor widow put in 2 very small copper coins.
I tell you the truth,
He said,
this poor widow has put in more than all the others. All these people gave their gifts out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she had to live on.
Some of his disciples were remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and with gifts dedicated to God. But Jesus said,
As for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down.
Teacher,
they asked.
when will these things happen? And what will be the things that are about to take place?
He replied,
Watch out that you are not deceived. For many will come in my name, claiming, I am he, and the time is near. Do not follow them. When you hear of wars and revolutions, do not be frightened. These things must happen first, but the end will not come right away.
Then he said to them,
Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, famines, and pestilences in
Don't worry about it,
various
Israel. We'll get
places,
one later.
and fearful events and great signs from heaven. But before all this, they will lay hands on you and persecute you. They will deliver you to synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors, and all on account of my name. This will result in your being witnesses to them. But make up your mind not to worry beforehand how you will defend yourselves. For I will give you words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. You will be betrayed even by parents, brothers, relatives, and friends, and they will put some of you to death. All men will hate you because of me, but not a hair of your head will perish. By standing firm, you will gain life. When you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those in the city get out, and let those in the country not enter the city. For this is the time of punishment in fulfillment
I'm so
of
sorry.
all that has been written. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. There will be great distress in the land and wrath against this people. They will fall by the sword and will be taken as prisoners to all the nations. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. Men will faint from terror, apprehensive of what is coming on the world, for the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. When these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near.
He told them this parable.
Look at the fig tree and all the trees. When they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is near. Even so, when you see these things happening, you know that the kingdom of God is near. I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Be careful, or your hearts will be weighed down with dissipation, drunkenness, and the anxieties of life. And that day will close on you unexpectedly like a trap. For it will come upon all those who live on the face of the whole earth. Be always on the watch, and pray that you may be able to escape all that is about to happen, and that you may be able to stand before the Son of Man.
Each day Jesus was teaching at the temple, and each evening he went out to spend the night on the hill called the Mount of Olives. And all the people came early in the morning to hear him at the temple.
Way out of order there, but I love that verse there. Nothing controversial in it. That every night he went to spend the night on the hill called the Mount of Olives. So when Jesus was at Jerusalem, he did not sleep in Jerusalem. He left Jerusalem and slept on the Mount of Olives each night. And I just think that's very interesting and not something you think about. All right, so Luke 21. I don't know who heard of the killer, who saw killer bees and Antichrist and beheadings and all that stuff in this passage, because it's not there. But let's just read and see what it does say. And this is probably going to be a lot faster. If you're just joining us, I go into this a lot more in depth in my Matthew 24 video, which I'm going to put a link up in the top to those things, so you can take a look at that if you want very much more specific details on these types of things. I'm assuming there'll be a lot of questions. Maybe there won't. But what I'm asking you to do is suspend your belief about what you think this is all in your future, and let's just read and see who it's talking to and what it says. Even if it goes against what you think you believe, or maybe what you've heard before. So it says, he looks up and he sees the rich putting their gifts in the temple treasury. This is the only time this story is mentioned, by the way. He also saw a poor widow put in 2 very small copper coins. To tell you the truth, he said, this poor widow has put in more than all the others. All these people gave gifts out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she had to live on. And that's an awesome story. Of course, she gave, in the King James, it says 2 mites. But it's just 2 really small copper coins worth almost nothing. And she put in everything she had, whereas Rich only put in a small amount. So this is still right after Jesus was at the temple, and he overturns the tables and all these types of things. And there we go. this is where it starts to get interesting. Some of his disciples were remarking about how the temple, this is the temple, where they do the sacrifices, where the priests went in there to make forgiveness of sins, was adorned with beautiful stones and with gifts dedicated to God. But Jesus said, "As for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down." "Teacher," they asked, "when will these things happen, and what will be the sign that they are about to take place?" Now you notice here in Luke, that's all it says. If you go back to Matthew 24, it says two things. But it's just a different wording. "Truly I tell you, not one stone left upon another, every one will be thrown down." They said, "Tell us, when will these things happen? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" And so some people try to make this be multiple things. Meaning, when will this happen? What will be the sign of your coming? And the end of the age. 3 different questions lasting here. But in reality, this is all the same question. And you can tell because Luke writes it differently. You may not know this, but Matthew and Mark have almost identical data. And even Luke has some very, very specific data that is found in both Matthew and Mark. And so the idea is that they either A, shared information, or B, that there was another gospel written. Sometimes people call it the Q document. And possibly that both Matthew, Mark, and possibly Luke also all borrowed information from when they were writing their gospel accounts, which is why they have some very oddly specific wordings that are exactly the same. But Luke decides to tell this a little bit differently in this section of the story. He words it just like we said. When will these things happen, and what will be the sign that they are about to take place? That's just Luke's version of the same question that they asked him about what one stone being left upon another. And in fact, they're the same thing. It isn't 3 different questions. That's what they're asking. They're remarking at the temple and all of its beautiful stones and buildings, and Jesus says all of these are going to be thrown down. No, not even one stone is going to be left upon another. And they say, when do these things happen? And what are the signs that are about to take place? When will this be? When, Jesus? When is the temple going to be destroyed? That's the question they're asking. And everything that follows is really about that. Not the end, necessarily the end of the world. That's how I see it, and I'm going to continue. We'll read this, and if there's any point you think maybe this is referring to the end of the world or a worldwide thing, we're going to look at that, and we'll analyze it, and maybe look at the Greek, and we'll go through those things. So, yeah, so again, who's he talking to here? Teacher, they asked. Some of his disciples. In Matthew, it says, as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, when will these things happen? So we can tell by using Matthew and Mark that when they're asking this here, there's nobody else present. It's just Jesus and the 12 apostles. And they want to know when this is going to be. And so Jesus is telling them. And who's he talking to? Is he talking to me and you? Or is he talking to them? Well, let's just look at the context here and see what is being said. He replied, "Watch out that you were not deceived, for many will come in my name, claiming I am he, and the time is near. Do not follow them." Now, again, is he telling us that me and you are not supposed to, we're supposed to not be deceived? He's telling his disciples not to be deceived. Not me. It's not you in the 21st century. It's them, the disciples. When are these things going to be, teacher? Make sure no one deceives you, because there's going to be people that are going to come and they're going to try to deceive you on these things. So pay attention. And so Jesus is talking to them, not to us. When you hear of wars and revolutions, do not be frightened. These things must happen first, but the end will not come right away. I hear this part all the time. Again, this is you. It's again talking to the disciples. You guys are going to hear of wars and revolutions, or Matthew says wars and rumors of wars. But what's funny is, if you really analyze what's being said here, Jesus says that's not a sign. People act like whenever there's war and crazy things happening, that's a sign of the end. Jesus actually says here that's not a sign of the end. There's always been wars. Always. Even in this time that Jesus was alive. And what does he say? These things must happen first, but the end will not come right away. Matthew words it a little bit differently. Watch and no one deceives you. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you're not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. That means that you're going to hear of these wars and rumors of wars, but that's not the end. That's not what we're talking about here. Just because you hear of wars and rumors of wars, obviously if he just told the disciples not one stone of the temple is going to be left upon another, it's not going to be because the king is going to come and hire somebody to dismantle the temple. If the temple was going to be not one stone left upon another and they're all going to be thrown down, that's because enemies are going to come and destroy it. This is a violent undertaking, and Jesus says you're going to hear of wars. That doesn't mean it's going to happen right now. Does that follow? Does that make sense? He's actually saying that wars and rumors of wars are not a sign of the end. Those things are common things. They've happened all through time, and they still happen today. And again, he's talking to his disciples. He's not talking to us. We have wars and rumors of wars today. Does that mean that the end is going to happen? They've been having wars and rumors of wars for 2,000 years, 4,000 years, and longer. Then he said to them, nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. So there's not a lot in the Bible about this, but there's wars in Greece and I think it's Thracia. They had places where there was lots of wars. Rome it talked about the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, which was anything but peaceful, if you follow history at all. They were at war constantly. I believe Josephus, who's an historian at the time, said wars were so common in those days that there's no need to write of them in any great detail, because there was just such a common thing. Nation rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. So that's, again, not necessarily a sign of the end. Wars and rumors of wars have always happened. There will be great earthquakes, famines, and pestilences in various places, and fearful events and great signs from heaven. So I think it's important to note that what I'm saying here is I think we're going to see by this, and I want you to be thinking about this and questioning if this could be true, that these events don't describe things that are happening in our end, but they're describing the things that happen in the end of the Old Covenant, the end of the temple specifically. What was the point of the temple? You remember? The Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament used to go in a tent. The Ark of the Covenant held the 10 Commandments. And the priests would do their duty inside of a tent that wandered from place to place. David wanted to build a permanent place for the Ark. And God told him, you're not supposed to do that. Your son's going to do that. And then Solomon builds the first temple, and that was, again, is the house of the Ark of the Covenant. And Jesus is saying all this is going to be thrown down. That means basically we're going to do away with this stuff. And again, what did Jesus preach about? Almost all his ministry. You've heard it said, thou shalt not commit adultery, but I tell you, if you lust in your heart, you've already done it. I tell you, don't hate your brother, that's like murder. And over again he says, the law says this, but I tell you this. So that's what was happening in those days. That's why the temple being destroyed was such a big deal. It was their entire center of their universe. And what I'm saying here, if you go all the way down to the end here, verse 32, all these things we're listing. Way down in verse 32, it says, I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. That's all the things that it lists in this chapter. Jesus is saying that all of these things will happen before that generation which he was living in at that time pass away. So this is an important verse, and we're going to be going through those things and trying to make the case on whether or not all these events took place in the first century or they didn't. And so we're going to look at those things. Was it, for instance, history on Jesus' side? Was one stone of the temple not left upon another? Everyone would be thrown down. Did that happen in the first century? It did. In 70 AD, about 40 years after this event here, Titus comes in with armies, and the Romans burned the temple to the ground. And they actually, the whole inside the temple was covered in gold, and the gold got hot and melted into the cracks of the foundations, and the Romans came in and pried up all the stones so they could get at the gold that melted through the cracks. And you can actually, if you were to go to Israel, there's pictures of them. You can see that on my Matthew 24 video. I share some of them, that the stones that they pried off the Temple Mount fell down and destroyed the street below, and they're still there to this day. All those stones, not one stone left upon another, did happen before that living generation passed away, proving that what Jesus said was true. If it were to refer to today, how could the temple be not thrown down again? There is no temple. That makes people today think that the third temple is going to be built, and then that temple will be destroyed. Is that really what was mentioning? I mean, isn't that the context of what was being said here? They're remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God. Was that talking about a third rebuilt temple later on? No, Jesus was at the temple. And they're saying, look, Jesus, look at all these beautiful stones. And Jesus says, as to what you see here, not in our future, what they saw there. The time will come and not one stone then would not be left upon another. And that's exactly what did happen. The problem causes people think, they read some of these deals, especially if you look in Matthew 24, the question is, talks about the end of the world. Did no modern translations use end of the world? The Greek word there is aeon, which means end of the age, not the end of the world. But anyways, so we're going to continue going on those things and seeing if that's what happens here. What we just read, there will be great earthquakes, famines, and pestilences in various places, and fearful events and great signs from heaven. Did that happen? Is that something that happened in between when Jesus said this and 70 AD when the temple was destroyed? Did that happen in that generation? And I think that you can. In fact, do you recall the story of Paul being in prison and Peter being in prison? What opened up the temple? What opened their prison doors and got rid of their shackles? If you recall, it said a great earthquake. Shook the prison and opened up the things, opened up the doors. There's several earthquakes mentioned in the book of Acts. In fact, we should probably just reference some of those. Here we go. About Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Suddenly there was such a violent earthquake, the foundations of the prison were shaken. At once all the prison doors flew open and every chains came loose. So some people will say here and say, well, no, that's not the kind of earthquake it means. There's going to be lots of earthquakes. They're going to be more and more frequent and getting stronger and stronger and stronger. But it doesn't say that. It just says there will be great earthquakes, famines, and pestilences. What about famines? Was there famines in those days? Great famines? Well, there actually was. And you can see that in the book of Acts as well. Oop. It says, during this time, some prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. One of them, named Agabus, stood up and through the Spirit predicted that a severe famine would spread over the entire Roman world. By the way, that word Roman world, it's only one Greek word. It's okumene. I can show you that there. It's Acts 11:28. Well, it doesn't matter. Over the entire Roman world. This happened during the reign of Claudius. So there was famines that spread all over the place. It says right in the book of Acts that there were famines that happened, just like Jesus said there was. Now, pestilences, that's not mentioned in Matthew, but no doubt that they're, I'm not sure what that could be referring to. I don't happen to know of any references in Acts where it mentions necessarily pestilences that I can come up with. But still, we can at least see the earthquakes and famines. And like I said, if you look back in Matthew 24, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. So this one just says earthquakes and famines. Of course, this is famines and pestilences, which I don't have a good answer for. But if Jesus said it, it must be true. And again, we go back down to it has to be true. Why? Because it says in 32, I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. That's one of those things. So either it didn't happen when that generation passed away, or it did. It's probably important that we talk a little bit about that passage. So people know what this seems to be saying. It seems to be saying that Jesus is saying all these things I just listed, between 1 to 32, it seems to be saying all of these things are going to happen to that living generation when he said it. But most people don't want to believe that, and so they have ways they try to get around this. So one of them is, you may see in the margins of your Bible on this verse, it may say, says this generation, it may have a little star there, and you go down to the bottom or to the side, and it'll say, or race. And what they mean is that, I tell you the truth, the Jewish race will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. The problem is, if you actually look at the Greek on that word, what is the generation meaning in the Greek? I've written there was no chapter breaks or verse. I think this in fact causes confusion concerning the preceding context. Oh, I absolutely think it does. In fact, I even think that the writers of whoever decided to break the Bible up at whatever verses and chapters they decided on, I think they actually have some theological significance to these. You can see it in between the break between 16 and 17. Because Matthew 16, 27 and 28 says some amazingly large things, and they put a big chapter break there before verse 1, which is important to the context. I think it does make a difference. But let's look at that. Let's look at the word there in Luke 21, 32. Wait, where the heck am I? You guys still there? My screen cut out for you guys. Give me a second. You are still there. Okay, give me a sec to fix this here. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so 32. Most certainly I tell you, this generation, that word there is genea. And it means generation. It's used 37 times in the Bible. And if you read every single time he says this generation, it always refers to the generation whom he's speaking. Stand up with this generation. The king of the south will stand up with this generation. Over and over again, it's translated as generation. It's not translated as generation because there is a Greek word for race. It's genos. That means race. Genea means generation. So, and besides the fact that the word actually is generation, there's a problem with that idea of it being race. Because what does that mean? What does that imply happens after these things happen? It says the Jewish race will not pass away till all these things have happened. That implies that after these things happen, the Jewish race passes away. Which that can't be, because that view holds that there's going to be a 1,000-year millennial reign from Jerusalem, and the Jewish race is certainly not passing away then. So that doesn't make any sense. The more modern way to get around this is to say this generation, meaning the generation that he was speaking to, the generation that sees these signs, rather, the generation that starts to see these signs happen, that generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Which, if you think about what it's actually saying, it basically means it could be any generation except this generation. Besides that, it uses this, which is called, it's a near demonstrative. It's to denote things that are close at hand. You would say this Bible. If there was a Bible way over there, you'd say that Bible. If it's talking about this generation, if there was talking about another generation, it would say that generation will not pass away till all these things take place. And again, there's also a logical problem with that, which is the generation that sees these signs will not pass away till these signs take place. Basically, that the generation that sees these things are going to see it, which doesn't make any sense either, because of course they would see it. If you're seeing the signs, well, then you're going to see it, which again doesn't make any sense. So I'm not saying that all these things had to take place in that generation. Jesus is saying those things had to take place in that generation. So we're just searching out to see if these things actually could be said to have happened that way. And if we're in doubt, we can try to study these things out and decide if we're really off on our thinking and try to figure out what Jesus has said. Because we can't figure this out. If what Jesus said isn't true, we might as well just all go home. If Jesus is wrong about this, then he could be wrong about anything. In fact, Bertrand Russell, who famously wrote a book, Why I'm Not a Christian, he listed this as one of the reasons that Jesus said he was going to return to his disciples' living generation, and he didn't. But I say that he did. Remember what happened when Jesus' first coming happened? They were expecting a conquering king to come, the Messiah that was going to rule them all and usher in a new kingdom where the Jews were in power all over the world. And they didn't realize. Remember what Pilate asked Jesus? He says, "What, are you a king of the Jews?" And Jesus says, "You're right that I'm a king." And then he says that, "You are a king then?" And he says, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But my kingdom is from another place." So, meaning his kingdom is not of this world. It's not physical. It's not the kind of king that he sits on a throne and has servants. And it talks about, there's a verse that says, "The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet." He's not going to sit on a literal throne, and he's not going to have his enemies go sit on hands and knees while he puts his feet on them. It's a metaphorical usage of the term. I was told, see, you are reading it now, so he was talking about you reading this when I questioned it. Oh yeah, for sure. The problem is that we can all read this. Every generation, anybody who opens the Bible can read this now. And what if we applied that to everything else? We go back and read when Noah was about to the world would be destroyed by a flood. We can read that now that it's about to be destroyed by a flood. So we have to understand that the Bible is we can understand a lot of things from the Bible, but we have to understand who it was written to. For instance, giving you an idea on context. It's in Hosea. Here you go. Hosea 1:2 says, "Go marry a promiscuous woman and have children with her." Is that what God wants us to do? This verse says we should go marry a promiscuous woman and have children. That's what we all should do as Christians. We should go marry, it says promiscuous woman. It used to say prostitute before they decided to make it a promiscuous woman, whatever. Does this mean we should go marry prostitutes? That's what God wants us to do? No, he told Hosea, a prophet, and he's teaching him a lesson through this. It doesn't mean it's necessarily always applying to us. So anyways, what we're again trying to go through and to see if these signs could have happened. And again, we can get a little more context again. I didn't get my ticket to the ark. Yeah, exactly. And I think none of this, especially when you talk about the ark or this other verses here, nobody has a problem realizing that it wasn't written to us. But they have a problem here. And I'm going to mention probably real briefly why that is. Why is it we want to see the end of the world? I don't think any Christian wants to go through a 7-year period of tribulation. But they kind of do. Because if you really think about it, I think we've been putting our hope falsely upon what we think the future holds with regards to Bible prophecy, instead of on what God did for us and what he wants from us in our life. Because how exciting would that be? One of the things I think about, and of course, if you haven't figured it out yet, I do not believe these things are in our future. I do not think we're heading for a 7-year period of tribulation. And so, one of the things, I had a friend of mine who's a hardcore militant atheist. He still is to this day. And before I moved to Wyoming, I told him at this point I was of the standard view that a 7-year period of tribulation was coming. And I've been witnessing to my friend for years and years and years. And we were just getting ready to leave. My parents were moving to Wyoming, and I was going to come with them. And I told him, I said, well, you know what? I haven't been able to convince you God exists, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you see a guy come up who's like going to be a president of the world, and there's going to be a 7-year period of tribulation, there's going to be beheadings, and there's going to be a third temple, and all this happens, and all the Christians disappear, then you'll know that what I'm saying is true and that God is real. And you know what he said? He said, "Oh, you're okay. Yeah, that would be big for me. I'd get it at that point." And so that was my last result. I moved away. I still talk to him on occasion, but I witnessed him on that, and now I realize, no matter if you believe what I believe or not, that's just a bad way to witness to somebody. And now I realize those things are not going to happen, and it's just, again, a bad way to witness. How exciting would it be, though, if all the Christians disappeared? Of course, we want to be one of the ones that disappear. Of course, that depends on if you're post-trib or pre-trib or mid-trib or all those types of things. But regardless, if you started to see these events happen, how exciting would that be? It's like seeing the parting of the Red Sea. In reality, it's because, we want to live by sight instead of by faith. Exactly. The funny thing is, we think, if Jesus just came down and did a bunch of miracles, everybody would believe in him. But he did that. He literally rose the dead, and not everybody believed in him. What about Pharaoh? Pharaoh saw it rain frogs, gnats, had darkness in some towns, no darkness in other towns. The firstborn of every animal and family die except for the Israelites. He saw the miracles. Did it make Pharaoh a Christian? No, it did not make Pharaoh a Christian at all. So seeing miracles, as exciting as it is, doesn't make you a Christian, and it shouldn't be your basis of faith. And so a lot of times when I start espousing this view to people and I start convincing them, wow, you're right, Tom, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. But then what do we put our hope into? And I realize that people's hope is not in the Lord. It's in seeing these exciting things happening. And I think that's the wrong way to look at things. I seen a guy a while back wearing a shirt that said, "I survived the rapture." Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder the reasoning for wearing such a thing, what he's trying to say. So anyways, we get some more hints here in this next verse about and great signs from heaven. Fearful events and great signs from heaven. Did that again happen? And we can see that through Acts. Remember, there were, the people were prophesying from Paul was having, being blinded and being able to see again. We had a raising of the dead. We had all kinds of things happen in the book of Acts. You can just go back and read it for yourself. All those things were happening. Oh, Kenneth Cole, I see, yeah. But all these things are going to happen. But before all this, they will lay hands on you and persecute you. Is that me and you? They're going to lay hands on us and persecute us? He's talking to his disciples. They will deliver you to synagogues and to prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors, all on account of my name. Is that talking to us? I mean, all you got to do is read the book of Acts, and you will see these things happen to the disciples. James is put to death. Paul and Peter are imprisoned and stoned multiple times. They're brought before the Sanhedrin. They're brought before Herod. They're brought before Agrippa. They're brought before all kinds of governors and kings and rulers. And the Holy Spirit did tell them what to say. This will result in you being witnesses to them. Did that happen? I mean, if you recall, that's what Paul did. When Paul was witness before Agrippa and he appealed to Caesar, Jesus said, "Take heart, Paul, as you have been a witness for me before Agrippa, you must also be a witness before me in Rome." And that's why he goes to Rome and appeals to Caesar to go talk to Caesar, where eventually he gets killed by Caesar. We don't ever get that part of the story in Acts, but he gets on the boat and he goes to Rome and he goes to prison in Rome, and eventually Nero, who was in charge, kills Paul. I would have loved to have been there or heard that story. Can you imagine the way Paul, got in people's faces And Paul said something to Nero that made Nero kill him. I would have loved to have heard how that went. Maybe someday when we're in heaven we can go back and watch those things. But make up for your mind not to worry beforehand how you will defend yourself, for I will give you words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. Again, this is talking to disciples. That happened. We just got to read Acts. Most people are going to agree with me up to this point. Well, yeah, that's talking about the disciples. But the rest of this stuff, well, that's not the disciples. That's just us. But again, this is all the same thing. The disciples asked him very specifically, when will these things happen, and what will be the signs that they were about to take place? These are those signs. Before the temple is destroyed, before every stone is thrown down, these things are going to happen. And those things did happen, just like it was said. And again, if you want more detail on this, I don't have all my notes here to be able to reference every little thing. I put it all together, and you can look in the description of this video for the end of the world video, or it may say about preterism. You can go in there and watch that one. It's much more in-depth and much more scholarly than this little talk that we're having. Still have 50 people here, so I haven't really lost you guys yet. You can probably just silently think I'm crazy. Is this making sense to any of you guys? I know I have some people that have already watched my videos and are already believers like I am, and so of course they're going to be here. But am I getting to anybody who's never heard these things and are maybe thinking about them for the first time? Is that's something to chew on? If you are, just let me know. That would be encouraging. All men will hate you, or you'll be betrayed even by parents, brothers, relatives, and friends. They will put some of you to death. Again, they did. All men will hate you because of me, but not a hair of your head will perish. Well, isn't that contradictory? He's going to put some of you to death, but not a hair of your head will perish. So he's going to keep safe those going to keep safe, but some of them will be put to death. Oh, thank you, Lynette. Appreciate that. And again, none of this is denoting some giant, cataclysmic, earth-shattering nuclear war. It's basic stuff. All of this happened in the book of Acts so far. We're going to get to some things here that that may be more of a stretch to swallow, possibly, but none of this, right? This is all basic. You can read this in the book of Acts. Nothing special here. None of this says that the entire world's going to fall apart. Again, if you read Revelation, you have some pretty giant apocalyptic things, and one of these days we can kind of go into that. But there's some pretty clear verses in Revelation. There's a lot of things in Revelation I do not understand, which is why I don't talk about it a lot. But there are some very big sign pointers about when these things would be. Surely something to consider. Well, yeah, keep it in mind. That's all I can ask you. Because it affects how you live your life today. I think you would agree that whatever you believe, you should trust God, right? And not be afraid. And everybody say, yeah, we should do that. But you know what? People are afraid. Every time there's trouble over in Ukraine or in Russia, or there's some war is going to happen, or some disease, or some microchips going to maybe come out and your credit card is going to be in your hand, everybody flips the heck out. And that need not be the case. Regardless, it need not be the case. I heard someone say one time, if you knew you only had 1 year left to live, would you go to medical school? And I think the answer would be no. If you thought you were going to die, you wouldn't go to medical school. You'd spend the last of your last year to live, doing things you thought were important. And that's the state of the church today. Is that the church today, they're not evangelizing like they should because they think it's the last time, last days, and it's all pointless anyways. It's all going to hell in a handbasket, so there's no point in us trying. But that's not the Great Commission. The Great Commission says we're to go do these things. Why would Jesus give us the Great Commission? Tell us to go and make disciples out of all the nations. But you can't do it. It's going to get more and more evil until I'm going to have to come. Satan's going to get in control. I'm going to have to come down and destroy the world. Even though I told you to give this Great Commission, you can't really fulfill it. I just can't swallow that. I can't. Don't understand. Do you still believe in Christ returning? So, well, I guess let's just keep going through, and that's why I want to just read the passages and say what they say, and let's just understand them as they go. And once we get to a verse that you think is describing those things, then we can talk about that. There's some debate about that particular issue. I can tell you my point, and maybe here at some point in the history, in the next week or two, when we're talking about these chapters, I'll tell you what I think. But I want us just to chew on the scriptures as they come, because that's how I did this. Me and Andrea came to this conclusion not easily, not quickly. It was years that we studied these things. And so I'd be very surprised if any of you could hear this for the first time and say, yep, sign me up. I just want you to just consider what each of these verses say and try not to make them say anything else. Just let them speak for themselves. Use the Bible to interpret itself and see what it's saying. Husband of 33 years died of COVID protocol on January 4th. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You have 13 years of 6 level home trying to understand a lot of things right now. Well, Lynette, I don't know if you've been watching our channel very long, but that's very similar to my story, although I don't have 13 but 9 kids. And my wife was of 20 years. And I have a bunch of videos where I do talk about my grieving process, and you can cry with all you guys, and it's not easy. I don't have the answers either, and I'm working on that harder than anything else. I'm trying to put my life back together again. Even though I don't want to, right? Don't want to put our life back together again. We want to just succumb. But we got little ones depending on us. Don't we? Not easy. So, anyways, Lynette, I want you to let's just take the scriptures as they come and decide what you think about that as each one as we go. I'd rather not try to get a giant big picture of all the things we think are going to happen, because all those things are based on these foundational things. Where instead of going from the bottom of the Bible scriptures, what Jesus said, and going up and deciding how we live our life, people have been told all these things are going to happen in a certain way, and these are the things we're expecting in the future, and then they put those things back into it. They almost have the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other hand, and say, oh, yep, oh, that, yep, I see that, we're right here at this verse, and they're comparing back and forth. Before she passed. Oh man, I'm so glad that you have, Lynette. One of these days we'll do a late night live video and we can just talk some more, but it's not easy, obviously. If you've been here all that time, you already know that. But not a hair of your head will perish. I think we'll probably stop right there. I'm kind of surprised we've gotten so far. Oh, I got to go to the next verse. We got to do this part here. Not a hair of your head will perish. By standing firm, you will gain life. When you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near. That's a very, very specific time indicator, an event indicator about what's going to happen. Is he saying the earth's going to be destroyed? What the next verse says? Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. When? When you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies. Did that happen? Absolutely. In fact, Titus chopped down every tree in a 5-mile radius to build siege engines to assault Jerusalem. And the Jews did all these little dirty tricks, and they would send people on them to jump on them. They'd set themselves on fire, and they would jump on their siege engines and burn them to the ground by destroying their own bodies. Isn't that crazy? And eventually they'd burn the siege engines down, and then he had to cut down all the trees in 10-mile radius. There was no trees left. They literally just decided to surround Jerusalem until they starved to death, and the people inside were eating their own children. Roman legionnaires were seeing women fighting over the chunks of their dead babies that they were eating to survive, and they were sickened by it. And they were vomiting and all this stuff from seeing this horrors that were going on inside of Jerusalem when these things happened. And what do you do to get away from this event? If you're in Judea, you flee to the mountains. Those in the city of, what city? Jerusalem. Get out. And not those in the country, not enter the city. What city? Jerusalem. Well, the next verse says, "For this is the time of punishment in fulfillment of all that has been written." Everything that is written in the Old Testament was being fulfillment at the time when you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies. This isn't talking about a global worldwide Armageddon. This is talking about the city of Jerusalem being destroyed. And isn't that what the question was? Going back to the beginning? About how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones. As for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left upon another. Every one will be thrown down. And when you see Jerusalem be surrounded by armies, you'll know that it's desolation. What's it's? The temple. It's desolation. Jerusalem's desolation. The temple's desolation is near once you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies. Then you need to get the heck out and not be there. Doesn't that sound very logical and reasonable? Is there anything here we've read up to now that indicates some worldwide conflagration of nuclear warheads and chips in hands and missiles and killer bees? Is any of that in this? No, it's not. It's actually extremely plain. The rest of the whole chapter is that way. In fact, there's nothing here that mentions, some sort of worldwide conflagration. The people that day have access to these warnings and writings? Not likely. It is likely. What's interesting is that Matthew, Mark, and Luke all contain this Olivet discourse. It apparently is very important. You can tell how important something is by which things are included in each gospel. For instance, Jesus being crucified, that's in all 4 gospels. Very important. Him doing miracles, raising the dead, healing the sick, all 4 gospels. Olivet discourse, the destruction of Jerusalem, very important. But you know what? It's missing out of John. But yet, who wrote Revelation? John. In fact, I heard someone say, and I think it's a pretty good hypothesis, that Revelation is John's Olivet discourse. We're not going to spend a lot of time on Revelation. Maybe I'll do that with you guys sometime. Let's look how Revelation opens, just real fast. The very first verse of Revelation gives us an idea of what's kind of going on here. The revelation from Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants what must soon take place. The point of this is to show his servants the things which must soon or shortly take place. And then he writes all these letters to these 7 churches, the real, literal, actual, existing, physical 7 churches. And he gives it to a messenger, and they run and they deliver this letter. And he says things like, "Don't worry, I'm going to protect you, Church of Philadelphia, from this worldwide thing that's going to take over the whole world. I'm going to protect you." What good did that letter do the Church of Philadelphia if he didn't actually protect them from anything? Very last chapter of Revelation says the same thing. He who testifies to these things says, "Yes, I am coming soon." Soon. Soon means soon. I have some people say, well, time is not the same. Day is 1,000 years. 1,000 years as a day. We can talk about those verses. There's a very easy explanation of those things. But he gave it to his servants to show them the things that must take place. In Revelation 11, he's told to measure the temple. And it says that the angel is using man's measurement, a human ruler. Why would God use a human ruler to measure things? Wasn't that for our benefit? It's not going to say it's going to happen soon, but say that's actually 2,000 years away. Anyways, we can talk about Revelation another time. But it's not. They didn't probably have much of these things. They had Jesus's thing. So Jesus gave them these warnings. He said, when you see these things happen, get the heck out of Jerusalem, guys. I'm telling you now. So the only people that died in Jerusalem during the siege were people that they didn't listen to Jesus' warnings. In fact, you don't hear any of the disciples being in the town, being in the city at that point. Could armies be the same as embassies? I don't know. There's not really necessarily a word for, I don't think, embassy in those days. But even still, we haven't had I mean, it's all about armies. Oh, I see. When Jerusalem being surrounded by embassies, I mean, you can read anything that there was, but it's important to note that only until the last 60, 70 years was there a Jerusalem at all. The fact is, there was a temple in those days. There was a Jerusalem in those days. And that temple did get thrown down, and Jerusalem did get surrounded by armies of Prince Titus, and it was destroyed and wiped off the map so thoroughly that it didn't exist for thousands of years. And recently, in 1948, they became a nation again. But besides that, we can talk about the implications of those things, but there was a Jerusalem in their day. And when it says they're going to arrest you and they're going to send you before synagogues and prisons, it's not talking about us, it was talking to them. Did those things actually happen? Yeah, it did. And so the word there, I mean, we look at the Greek word armies if you want to actually look at it. It's in verse 20. That must be it there. Stratopedon. From the base of stratia and the same of pedinos, a camping ground, i.e. implication, body of troops, army. Well, I don't think so. Embassy is not really anything to do with a military installation. So I don't, it doesn't seem to go with me. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Because of course I think that these things happened already. So of course I'm going to be biased that way. But look at the actual word. I don't think that it makes a lot of sense. Other part here it says those in the country not enter the city. Of course, Matthew, it says that those on the rooftop not go back down into their house to get anything out of their house. When's the last time you were on your rooftop? Okay, well, we'll continuing on there. Next week, probably go over some of these verses again next week. Again, if you're interested, if this is exciting to you at all, look down right below this video and click on the description and look inside of there. What does it actually say? I should give you the exact wording so you can find it in the description here. Let's see here. It's been a while since I've read the description. Let's see here. So it says there, if you scroll down the thing, it says, we'll be reading in the 1984 NIV. Underneath that, a few different paragraphs. It says, if you are more interested in the preterist interpretation of the end times, I'll likely be making reference to, here's my video that explains what the heck that means. So you can click on that video there. It'll go very much in detail, give you a lot more in depth. The Luke version of this story is much more localized. And so if you want more fantastical verses to have addressed, you can address those in the Matthew 24 version. And I do that in the Matthew 24 video, so you can sure check that out. Oh yeah, thank you, Rachel Day, what she said. I'm much more proud of that video, Jen. I'm much more proud. I agonized for weeks and weeks, putting all my ducks in a row. I hadn't seen a video that puts it all together like I wanted to see. I heard Andrea say once that you make the video that you wish you want to see. And so that's what I did on this. The only video I had seen was 2 hours long, and I managed to do this in an hour long, which is still a long commitment, but I think it's a lot more exciting, I think. So, but check it out, and at least if you think I'm crazy as a loon, just file it away in your brain. Because one thing's for sure, people have been saying that Jesus is about to return for 2,000 years. I have a book that actually has every single time anybody predicted the end. And it's full. It's about this thick. All full of times people predicted the end. And the one thing they all have in common is they were all wrong. Besides that, it misses the entire point of why God created us on earth. He created man in the garden for a specific purpose. He created us here with the ability to have free will, the ability to sin, And yes, the fall happened, and that stink. And Jesus came and redeemed us from the fall, and now those cancel out. Now we're back to that original purpose. That's why we're here. We're here. I believe this world is a test for entering the next life, entering heaven without removing free will. And so that's the big deal. How do you, and it's like if God could create a whole bunch of people that did not have the ability to sin, that couldn't sin, but again, if you couldn't sin and you force somebody to love you and to act with love, then are you really loved? If you force your kids to give you a gift, do you feel all touched and happy that your kids gave you a gift? It says no, it's commanded. Robots don't love anybody. They're forced to do whatever they do. So by allowing us to have free will and still seeing who serves God, remember what he said in the parable of the talents? Whoever's faithful with a small thing will be faithful with a big thing. That's why we're here. This life is the small thing. Eternal life is the big thing. And if we haven't been shown worthy to handle this mortal life, we're not going to get an immortal life. So that's why we're here. We're not here so we can see the end. In reality, how self-centered and selfish is that? That if God was going to destroy everything, it had to be in my lifetime. That's so silly. Alrighty. Well, I appreciate you guys. Like I said, watch the other video. If you have any questions, think those up. If you're watching this on the replay and you think I'm crazy, write it down there. I'll answer them. We can respond to those things. And I just want you to keep this in mind as you go through the scriptures as a possibility. I think you'll find that it hits all the marks and is the easiest way to read the Bible. All right, everybody. Well, I certainly appreciate you. And don't forget to like the video on your way out. And we will catch you next time. See you later.